Hello, I'm Dan the Radio Man. Let's talk about the BBC. So, Tim Davie has been talking about funding models and the future of the BBC with the Royal Television Society in a kind of 40 to 45 minute statement bit and then a question and answer bit, which took about 15 minutes. So it's about an hour long in total. I don't think they've publicly released the video of him speaking on I think if you go to the Royal Television Society's YouTube account, it's last year's one. They haven't uploaded this year's one at time of recording just yet, but I have been able to watch the whole thing, and it was interesting. It was very interesting. A couple of side notes to take away from that as we look at the future of the BBC and its funding, and the government are putting in place a panel of I don't want to say so-called experts, but a panel of people to look at the future funding model of the BBC. Weirdly, they're all from commercial backgrounds. BBC has famously never made a profit because it's never had to. It is funded forever since it existed by a public license fee, which is set to increase in the coming weeks and months. Now, whether you disagree or agree with the public license fee, I'll set out some potential models for the BBC's future later. I'm not going to give you my opinion on it because that would be a pointless waste of time, and I do freelance for the BBC as well, just as a point of interest, just to say that maybe I'm not completely subjective on this subject. But Tim Davie did talk about floating the idea of commercials on the BBC, and then stop that idea point blank by saying commercialization influences the editorial, which is very true. It did, and he pointed out that kind of right-wing media in the US dominates the market, and the most polarizing, he put it as the most polarizing media is the most profitable. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he was indicating. We haven't seen that in this country. GB News is yet to make a profit, and Talk TV is pretty much dead on arrival. But he's, of course, alluding to Fox News, which is the most profitable American news network. Now, you can agree or disagree with the content of Fox News all you like, but he is correct in saying that the commercialization of any media organization does influence the editorial guidance of it, because they're not going to criticize one of their biggest sponsors that brings in a lot of money. Also, highlighting the fact that there is a modern media trend to put things behind paywalls. That is not going to happen with the British Broadcasting Corporation, which I'm delighted to say is fantastic. He also talked about media partnerships, so the likes of Doctor Who and Disney, which I view as a great thing, especially for us in the UK, because we don't have to buy Disney Plus to watch Doctor Who, although they do get it 24 hours before us, Disney Plus subscribers. So they do have a little bit of an advantage in that sense, but they all have to pay to watch Doctor Who on Disney Plus. Very much annoying, like the Canadian Broadcasting Service and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation that used to air Doctor Who in those territories. Unfortunately, now it's on Disney Plus for them, but it's great for the UK and great for the production budget of Doctor Who, which has increased as well. And the whole Whovian universe, I want to call it is just, I love it. I think it's great. I think it was a great idea. Whoever came up with that, I think well done to you. And you should be getting a pay rise. License fee reform he was talking about. Now, I'm not going to go fully into that because there is no concrete plan for license fee reform. What is outlined is the biggest ever public consultation on the future funding of the BBC. So whilst the government is doing its own kind of inquiry into what the future funding model of the BBC could be, will be, should be, in their view, the BBC will be conducting kind of the same thing on their own back, talking to the owners of the BBC, the British public, as Tim Davie says quite rightly in his speech. We need to talk to our shareholders, and that is the UK public, as they are a public broadcaster. So those are kind of the main points. There was a question session afterwards, he did talk about news and journalism, and that drew responses from both the television industry in Bectu and the journalism industry in the National Union of Journalists. So we're going to show you the NUJ's response first, because the NUJ has said there is a concern about the linear public service references made by the Director General in the speech. Cuts have consequences, and the BBC's high quality and strong reputation, commitment to public services, public service operation, which remains free of commercial interference, vitally important in today's rapidly changing media landscape. There are ideas, rumor and innuendo that maybe some podcasts on BBC Sounds or the app itself might be slightly commercialized. I believe this has been rejected. However, if BBC podcasts are on another platform and there is the opportunity to put adverts on them, then that might be a future. We'll get to the potential funding models for the BBC going forward. They continue in this statement saying, "We welcome the importance placed by Tim Davie on impartial journalism and strong news provisions, although this somewhat flies in the face of cuts to Newsnight." Once again, this is not my view. This is the NUJ, the National Union of Journalism. So it flies in the face of cuts to Newsnight, Panorama and Current Affairs. In an election year, it's crucial to have a strong BBC with universal reach to provide audiences with impartial information, free from AI supercharged fake news. We welcome the acknowledgement of the safety concerns that journalists face globally, including recent acts against BBC Persian and other Iranian journalists for simply doing their jobs, which was highlighted by Tim Davie in the speech. Such threats must not impede impartial and accurate journalism in the public interest. Whilst the NUJ advocates the use of new and varied platforms for content, we are concerned about the accessibility and availability of content for traditional linear audiences and for those with accessibility needs. For the BBC to be truly ours, it needs to reflect, to be available to everyone in all communities. I think that's a subtle reference to the local radio cuts, which we've covered on this channel. They continue by saying, "We welcome efforts to secure a return to government funding for the World Service, which has a proven track record of delivering significant soft power for the UK overseas." On the future of the licence fee, we look forward to engaging in a meaningful consultation with the aim of securing the long-term future of the UK's national broadcaster. We support an approach which is progressive, fair, and proportionate. The NUJ is seeking further information about the proposed move of BBC monitoring into the commercial studios arm, alongside an ongoing discussion about union recognition for NUJ members in the wholly owned subsidiary. So that's the NUJ talking. Back to the other media union that is more TV focused than journalism focused. Although, you can be a journalist and be a member of Bectu. I almost joined Bectu. Their statement reads as follows, and by the way, I'll link both of these down below so you can read them yourself. They start with the BBC is a globally revered institution, a cornerstone of our democracy, and a long-standing incubator of British talent. In a rapidly changing media landscape, we welcome the BBC's acknowledgement that it must reform to ensure it remains a world-leading public service broadcaster. The BBC has had to make difficult financial decisions, appreciated by the government's decision to freeze the licence fee. It is right that the Director General has acknowledged the significant cuts that have taken place as a result, hitting titles and content that audiences love and jobs across the country, creating significant pain for Bectu members. Bectu has long argued that any review of the BBC's funding model must be predated by a fundamental national conversation about what we want from the BBC and how that can be delivered. We have also been clear that there is yet to be a better funding model proposed that would ensure the BBC can maintain its loads of essentially all of its services. We therefore welcome the Director General's commitment to proactively research the scope of the license fee post 2028, including how it will be more progressive and ensuring fair, proportionate enforcement and the BBC's public consultation. I mean, Tim Davie did say that this kind of the biggest ever public consultation will take place next year ahead of, well in advance of the end of the Royal Charter that currently sees the BBC's funding model. They go on to say, we are likewise pleased to hear that the BBC will discuss World Service funding with the government. We hear a lot of warm words from the government about global Britain. We maintain that these warm words should be matched by funding that ensures it can remain significant soft power asset. The BBC's success is critical for that of the wider UK creative industries. British storytelling is loved locally and around the world, and it is the skills and talent of both BBC staff and the many freelancers engaged by or via the corporation who bring these to life. We are heartened by the BBC's comments and commitment to continue to back British stories and champion creative talent across the country. And they were talking about moving more stuff out of London in the entire, in one bit, sorry about that, in one part of it. They were talking about moving more and more out of London and creating he wanted to avoid the creation of kind of regional hubs, but essentially, that's kind of what he's describing from my perception of it. He's kind of describing that, like the Channel 4 News coming from Leeds now, where it used to come from London, and the ITN building, it's now from Leeds. And that's just one example. So that's kind of the unions agreeing to... I don't know how you read that. I kind of read it as they're agreeing to disagree, which is absolutely fine. This biggest public consultation, as I say, takes place next year. So what are the alternative funding models for the BBC? Well, the BBC can maintain a licence fee if it can agree the Royal Charter with the government. The problem is that you're probably going to find that just based on kind of world economics, that fee that it's going to get, the money it's going to get, is probably going to get cut because other areas of the economy probably need it. But I do agree with Tim Davie's statement that strong public services lead to a strong economy. And especially the creative industry is worth so much money. And we saw in the statement by the Chancellor recently in the budget, more tax cuts for creative industries to encourage more Hollywood and television production into the UK, and we are seeing that. Major studios don't want to do business in LA. They want to do it here in the UK, which is fantastic for our film and television industry. It's great for British actors. It's great for British production crew, and I know somebody who works as a visual effects artist, and then they have work lined up because of the potential work coming in from the United States, and it's fantastic. But I just, as a radio first person, I just can't get over the cuts to BBC Local. I know. We're what, 6 to 7 months into these now? I still, I don't think it's working. But that's just my view. Let's talk about the BBC funding model, because this is... So they can, as I say, carry on with the licence fee if they can agree it with the government. I would predict that would receive a cut in funding. They could, even though it's been ruled out by Tim Davie in this speech, commercialise. They could go for an RTE model, which is the Irish state broadcaster, where they have both advertising and a license fee. But that is RTE in Ireland is facing the same pressure as the BBC. Oh, you're this to this people and you're that to that people. And RTE faces the same issues. The worst kind of model is the paywall public service donation like PBS in the United States. Now, PBS is very different from the BBC. PBS is only television, and that's it. It does not operate radio channels, but it's still, I think PBS is probably the worst funding model I think I've ever seen. It's just disastrously bad, just in my view, because they rely on a lot on public funding and donations from very wealthy people. And I don't think it makes them brilliantly subjective, but I've never sat down and watched PBS at length. They have got some very good documentaries though. So I'll give them that, but I just don't like their funding model. Or you can go with the the Australian funding model, which is a grant-based system where essentially the Australian government writes a grant to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation every year or so, and essentially they give them that money, and it is purely from taxpayer money. No license fee, just a grant written by the government to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. So there's another model. There are multitudes of other models, including semi-commercial models. There is this straight paying it through taxation, not through. I know TV license is essentially a tax, but getting rid of the term TV license and just saying, well, it comes from general taxation instead of just this one specific tax, that is a potential funding model. But once again, it requires the government to agree with the BBC. And let's face it, by 2028, given if the polls are to be believed, it will be a different government of the day. It will be the Labour government of Sir Keir Starmer. So we wait and see what the future of the BBC. But I'm more interested in, not my opinion, but your opinion. What is the future funding model of the BBC? Would you like it behind a paywall? Would you like it to see fully commercial? I hasten to add that the commercial entities like in radio like Bauer and Global would be very much opposed to the BBC taking on adverts, and probably ITV and Channel 4 and Channel 5 would most definitely, and Viacom through Channel 5 would most definitely be opposed of the BBC taking up advertising space in a market that's already crowded, that's already losing advertising reach as well to Meta, social media, Twitter, and all of it. So it's difficult. So what is the future funding model? Is it an RTE model? Do we continue with the license fee, which I think is what Tim Davie kind of favours? Reading between the lines there. But what do you think? Leave it in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching. I am Danny Harrington. You can check out my social links below and come follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at DJ_Danny_H. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.